When you think about enablement, right, you're not just enabling revenue, you're enabling every individual. As sellers, we're constantly having our calls recorded, reanalyze them, we have enablement watch them, and we do that too. Are we doing that to our hiring managers? Recruiters is sales. I am translating that across the board. Recruiters are AEs. Like, they have to be able to sell, they have to be able to pitch, they have to be able to make sure that they are qualified to run in your company and for the role that they're specifically hiring for. Enablement is not revenue. It is not sales. It is not customer success. Enablement is
Hey Matt, how's it going, brother?
Hey, good, Michael. How's it going?
Good. I caught a cold, but other than that, like, things are great. Have you been?
Not bad. Been very busy. Talk to you about a few of the projects that I'm working on, but yeah, just busy keeping my head above water and trying to make the world run one day at a time.
Yeah. So, but just to kick it off, love to get to know you a little bit more. Just tell us a little bit about your journey, what you're working on today, and what problems you are trying to solve, for the community.
Yeah. So where I'm at today, I'm actually doing two big ventures. One of my biggest ventures that I'm running right now is building a recruiting software that replaces the old clunky ATS and modernizing it into infusing it with a CRM, because essentially recruiters are still, sellers, AEs, right? They're selling the vision, they're selling a role, they're selling basically where this next individual wants to spend the rest of their time and their career at. So we're working on a way to basically help recruiters find top talent, building out their lead list, finding ways to enable hiring managers to help them fill the role instead of filling that seat. And then we're basically wanting to help do a lot of the forecasting that's going on with them. So capacity planning is such a huge burden that doesn't often lie within the HR function. They're usually the last ones to know, but we should let them and enable them to be the experts in those areas, which is another part of our platform that we're actually helping drive to give the recruiters more of a voice at the table as well.
This is pretty cool. Like, it sounds like everybody's moving towards the direction of let's get rid of recruitment team. Let's just
Right.
automate the entire process. But it sounds like you guys are actually empowering the recruitment team and HR leaders to do their job better.
Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of this lately is like AI is the devil. Um, it's not. It's not the devil. It can be. It can be. I always go back to the Spider-Man term, right? With great power comes great responsibility, right? We've all heard it. It's too cliche. But AI could actually be the enforcing tool to help drive productivity if done right. And I think that is when I created Perfect Hire, that was our vision. Is I don't want to replace recruiters, just the same way that I don't want to replace salespeople. There's something about a human touch and a human gut instinct that AI will never be able to have. Yes, they can learn our models, they can learn the way we think, they could probably speak for us as well too, but at the same time, there's something that's still important about the human interaction that AI will never be able to take away from us.
Look, we share the same sentiment. Like, that's pretty much what we are trying to do here at Selling This Win for sellers. And to your point, recruiters are sellers too. But I want to hear your perspective on this. But just imagine if AI can really get the job done and do it better. Like, we say, yes, human touch. I understand that. But what we say is, like, at some point in time, maybe for sales, some transactional deals could be done through AI. It's just like having a PLG option on your website, but maybe a little bit more advanced. But for deals that you need conversation with multiple stakeholders, things get more complex, and you need really project management skills. Then I think it's too soon to think that AI can really take charge of that. How would you compare the sales to recruiting in that sense?
When it comes down to getting just that gut instinct, that is this person going to be a culture fit? Is this person going to live up to our values? Does this person have the grit to get the job done? That's something that AI is not going to be able to really see, right? There might be the basic level of, yeah, I could score them on a scorecard and make them look like that, but it's still unseen that they can actually determine those factors, right? You
Hmm.
look at things with empathy and, customer success. They have to have a little bit of that empathy and along with support. How can AI measure that? I don't see that as a possibility yet. Yes, they can grade you on the tonality of your voice, the sentiment of what you wrote, but that's it, right? There's not the actual compassion or passion behind the actual voice or the message that's being transcribed.
I agree with that. And another one, a big one, is curiosity. I know we can't just tie it to the questions they ask, let's say
Yeah,
after a question, but you can notice if someone is really curious about your company, about your vision. Like, it's not only about the question they ask, like that uh, face impressions that they make when you tell a story or share something.
right.
This is really, really hard for AI to right now really and truly analyze. Maybe at some point in time it's possible, but for now, I think we're really at the very infancy of AI, although it's very powerful. So tell me why you switched from enablement. Dude, you've been around in enablement forever, worked with a lot of great companies. Like, what happened?
Yeah, I had my great strand of bad luck, I feel. Working for companies with ZoomInfo, Chorus, Chili Piper, all great companies that have been established within the sellers market and stuff like that. Sadly, however, through acquisitions or rifts, right, I got caught in the middle of those. Um, and so for me, when I started out Perfect Hire back in 2023, the original name was Caius, and we were going to be an enablement recruiting boutique firm, right? Kind of similar to some of the other ones that are out there. But I noticed that there was quite a few people that were actually trying to do the same thing at the time. Took that break from there and started out my own software, which is Perfect Hire now. And what got me going on why I created this is twofold. One, I wanted to control my own destiny. I was tired of living out to somebody else's paycheck or somebody else's VC fund running out or, wherever that might be. And I was truly inspired. I've always wanted to be, the leader of my own company, my own brand, and really control my own function. And that's exactly what enablement had empowered me to do is run my own department as a
Mm-hmm.
cross-functional unit. And now I'm taking a lot of those skills to drive this in my own. Um, and why specifically in the recruiting platform and not in enablement? Well, I take a look at one of my most recent hires that I had on my team, and it was a failed hire. It went through the pipeline. A recruiter passed it all through, made it all the way up to the CRO, and our CRO was very adamant that, hey, if it's got to me, it's the final interview. Like, I'm not backtracking. I'm not going to do multiple interviews for a role if it's gone up to me. So if got to him, that was the interview. And as a hiring manager, I had no power in the way that my interview process was actually working and navigating.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of what transcribed to me to get to this point here of building out Perfect Hire. And it was also to the fact that there was a lot of like mediocre flags that were flagged out and people couldn't pinpoint it, but it's also because they weren't asking the right questions. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why we've infused, AI generated questions based off of the job description and the resume. So that way we could actually tailor interview questions that match our needs, but relative to their own experience. So when it comes down to that, right, the recruiting area is incredibly important because with bad hires, you're going to have bad outcomes. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's why I've shifted from the enablement side, right? And now I'm doing pre-enablement by enabling our recruiters and the hiring managers basically ask those right questions to fill that role versus filling the seat to make everybody have more of a tenured long-term experience at the company that they're actually signing up.
Very interesting. Like, first and foremost, congrats.
Thank you.
Another founder to another founder. And you just tell that story, which is really interesting. And it sounds like what you guys are doing, you pretty much helping recruiters build that skill set. They need to ask the good questions at some point on their own. Did I get it
Yeah.
correctly?
And it's not even necessarily the recruiter, right? If you think about it, when we're building out, interview cycles or interview plans, you're
Mhm.
bringing in multiple cross-functional roles that are going to be
Yeah.
interacting with that individual at the same time when they're fully on board. And oftentimes, right, you don't know that you're jumping into an interview that day unless you get the notification from your
Yeah.
calendar 10 minutes. Hey, you have an interview. Well, shit.
Hmm.
Now I got to go ahead and think of some questions to ask them. Here are some pre-populated questions that, our recruiter
Hmm.
put in there, but they're too generic and too vague. They don't give the same examples. And your candidate is stuck basically given the repetitive answers that they give on every single interview.
Hmm.
And at the same time, right, you want to understand the full breadth of that candidate that you're bringing in. What
Hmm.
is their experience? How do they actually understand how to do all this? What is their level of growth and maturity throughout their career? When you're getting these candidates that come in with these generic questions, they're going to give you their last or their most proud moment only.
Hmm.
They don't give you the time where they failed and they got fired from their job or laid off because they weren't executing, right? They didn't tell you about the moments where they learned something different. They're just giving you the
Hmm.
generic of what sounded like they learned something to make them still look great. And that's
Yeah.
essentially what you're trying to do. But a lot of times, these interviewers or the people that are making these decisions, they want somebody who is hungry, who can evolve, who can adapt, who's going to continue to grow and further have interest in growing their own career. Not necessarily the brown noser that's going to say, my shit don't stink and my onboarding plan was great, right? Like that's not where we want to really like land that. Of course you want to promote that stuff, but you got to say how you got there. You got to say how you got there.
Hmm. Interesting. So, just going back to that exact example, you mentioned two really important things. First and foremost, multiple people will get involved in the process.
Yeah.
So you take a lot of people involved, it means a lot of time will be spent on one talent.
Mhm.
And from the other angle, that talent will get frustrated too,
Right.
talking about the same topics, repeating, same stories, or real or not real, just about how
Right.
great the career has been so far. And then at the end of the day, you hire them, you bring them to the company, start ramping them, and just realize, oh shoot, this is not a right fit. So, how do you guys right now help avoid that from top of funnel perspective? Walking towards the process.
Yeah, so with our platform, it all starts with the recruiter, right? You fill out that application, they get all your information in there. It goes through almost a double screen. So the recruiter will go through, and just like Tinder, right? It's a black or white. That's all it is,
Hmm.
black or white. Yes or no. Now on the recruiter level, we do get a little bit of gray. We do have one shade of gray in there. But that shade of gray is I'm on the fence with that. I'm going to kick that over to the hiring manager because ultimately it's going to be their decision to move forward with this.
Hmm.
So the hiring manager now is stuck in the Tinder situation of yes or no.
Hmm.
And yes, perfect. We advance them on to the next stage. No, hey, thanks, but no thanks. That hiring manager then has that control again over the person that's going into their pipeline from top of funnel.
Hmm.
At every single level of the interview, whether it's a recruiter screen, hiring manager screen, panel screen, project, CRO, executive, whatever it might be, right? We have tailored questions that are already made up for you throughout each one of those stages. We, as our product evolved, right, we allow you to select the topics you want each one of those interviews to, go along with. So whether it's values and cooperation or strategic and leadership or tactical and grit, right? Like we have different topics that the questions are geared towards those specific entities. So that way, when you do have a sales leader jump in there, right? You have that sales leader that says, I need somebody that's hungry. I need somebody that's communicative. I need somebody that's going to be direct. Perfect. Those are topics we're going to give you. These are questions that are going to reflect those topics for you. How do we continue to do that? And at the end of every single one of those interviews, we essentially say, all right, here it is. Here are all the notes. Instead of going to the recruiter to go ahead and screen those questions, right, and gather all that feedback, it gets a notification push to the hiring manager. And that hiring manager now is stuck with that tender decision again.
Hmm.
Yes or no. And that's all it is. Yes or no. And as soon as they hit no, guess what? Thanks, but no thanks. Yes, cool. We'll send out the calendar invite telling them, hey, they made it on to the next round. The recruiter's job at that point is to continue to still source great talent for that role, but it's also for them to open up their pipeline so that way they can continue to source for other roles as well too. Now, what if that candidate gets stalled? That's when the recruiter will intervene as well. But we want to create that automation, that flow, that less friction to move a candidate through the pipeline. I mean, we've all been there when it comes down to it, right? We've waited 2-3 weeks for that next interview. And it's not a good candidate experience at the same time. So we want to continue to move this forward by putting the top talent at the top and allowing our pipeline to move flawlessly. Same thing as when we're forecasting, right? I want to know that close date. I want to know what that's going to look like. Let's progress that forward. Let's get the close date one. Let's make sure that we're filling, again, the role and not the seat by equipping and giving the hiring manager the visibility into what they're bringing onto their team.
I think this is really important because so many of the problems we seeing are go-to-market teams. Like this is our focus. Of course, it's broader than this. Like any organization, need a good source of talent and process to really do a good job. But I want to focus on go-to-market teams, and you have this background. I'm sure you have many stories to share. One of the major problems I'm seeing right now is that we hire the bad talent, the bad fit. Let's don't call it the bad talent. It might be a fantastic, person, but maybe not a right fit for this organization. And then we bring enablement or even like sales leaders that, hey, fix the problem. Yes, our job as leaders is to really help our talent grow and get better at what they do. But at the same time, I think it's a little bit unfair because for the leader, you already inherited the team that might not even be the fit. It's just like my dog. I have a husky. And I was joking with my wife. We were sitting and I was talking to ChatGPT. I said, can I make this husky a guard dog? And at first it was just like, yeah, with good training. I was like, man, just don't fluff it up. So it's the same thing. You get someone who's not a fit for selling in certain industry, in certain environment, and we try to change them. And, we cannot change people. Yes, you can help them. You can enable them. But this problem is already there. So why not fixing the core issue before we get into, again, getting stuck trying to change someone instead of the process, right? So I want to hear some stories from your days in enablement when you had to deal with a bad fit, person, and you have to build programs around it, right? Let's give more training. Let's do more one-on-ones to see if we can actually solve the problem. Do you have any stories like this that you can share?
Yeah. So one of my most recent companies I worked for, I laughed because their philosophy around onboarding was they can go through the new hire boot camp. They go through our onboarding program for go-to-market, right? And if they fail onboarding, then they're immediately fired. And I looked at the question. I'm like, okay, yes, I love the assertiveness. I love the emphasis that it puts on these individuals to pay attention during onboarding. I love that they're going to go ahead and retain the information, but they're also living in fear at the same time, which then is not a very good cultural experience when they're first getting into this, right? But then on top of that, if they pass that within 90 days, they have to go through another set of certifications. If they fail that, they're fired again. And so for me, it was like, what are we doing at the very beginning to ensure that people won't even have, we don't even have to have that policy in play, right? There should be no policy that allows, hey, I'm going to hire you. You just put in your 2 weeks notice at your other job that you were somewhat comfortable at, and now you have the potential of being fired right away. It doesn't, 1 + 1 did not equal 2. And so for me, it was, we really need to restructure the way that we're doing our interviews. And when we were looking at the way that they were doing their interviews, right, there was a whole new philosophy put in play. The questions were kind of already outlined for every single role, whether it's an AE, manager, sales engineer, whatever. And when I looked at it, right, it was still just very generic. It was still generic. Like, you could put lipstick on a pig, it's still a damn pig. Like, your husky is never going to be a guard dog. Sorry. I've seen Pomeranians that are probably more fierce than a husky. But at the same time, though, right, like, we were changing the process. We weren't changing what the outcome could actually look like. We thought we were. And as it was tested, we were still hiring people that were on the fence getting into their onboarding program. And, I'd sit there at the end of the onboarding class and speak to the managers and tell them, hey, these are the things that you're really going to have to work on. Some, hardly anything, right? There were great hires. Don't get me wrong. There were really good hires. But then there was others and you're like, damn, how did they make it through this interview process? Like, they had to take a CCAT. They had to make sure that they could do this. They had to make sure that they could, speak the language and be hungry and have that grit. where did we fail in that process? And I think one of the things that, as sellers, we're constantly, having our calls recorded, we analyze them, we have enablement watch them, and we do that too. Are we doing that to our hiring managers? No.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Are we engaging in running trainings for our hiring managers at the time of every single role that they interview for, or quarterly? No. We're not enabling people to ask the right questions. We're not enabling people to be thought leaders. We're not enabling people to really dig down in the deepness of what this company is, nor are we certifying anybody that does an interview to say that, hey, they are certified to bring in new candidates.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You think about MedPick, you think about Challenger, you think about all of these. Where's the recruiting methodologies? There's a few out there, but they're not adhered to like they are with MedPick. They're not adhered to like they are with Challenger. They are not guided and emphasized on the recruiting field as they are within the sellers. And so when we're looking at these different examples, right, again, we see good talent, right? Let's talk about, transition with sneakers. It's easy to think about that. I'm a track guy. I'm not a track guy. I hate running, but I'm a track guy, right? I'm not going to go buy myself a pair of high top Jordans, right? It's just, it's the same concept, wrong field.
Mm-hmm.
You have to understand the difference between of what you're actually looking for and the fit of that exact candidate. And I think oftentimes when you get a hiring panel on there, the panel or the rest of the team, other than the hiring manager and the recruiter, don't know exactly what you specifically need or want. And it's
Mm-hmm.
also up for the hiring manager to make sure that that's explicitly clear as you're going through those interview processes as well.
This is so cool, and I think there's another angle to this as well. So this is something that I'm seeing right now with one of my clients. So these guys are hiring like crazy, and I say crazy. You got boot camp of like 50 sellers coming in, and I'm gonna put like all the challenges and costs aside, and then we dig in a little bit more and see, why do we need even 50 people in a boot camp? Like honestly, what's the problem here? Then we talk to recruitment, and we realize if one person going through 400, 500, resumes and get them to the call and do assessment, then get hiring manager involved, just to realize that the type of seller that we are trying to hire for this position is already wrong, because the compensation is wrong, where we're
Yeah.
looking for that person is wrong, and then we are expecting one recruiter go through this massive non-fit talent and find just a few gold here and there. And of course, that's why we see when people come in, and to your point, how did they get here? Like
Right.
those guys have to, hit their KPIs too. Like out of this like 400 nonsense, I have to bring someone that might be potentially a fit, and they were the best ones. So I think it's a bigger problem. Maybe I'm off base.
No, you're not. I mean, you think about it, right? Like a recruiter's job is almost essentially as an SDR or BDR.
Mm-hmm.
You got your lead list of 1,000 people. You got to sift through that list. You got to make, 60, 50 calls a day, whatever it might be. You have to find those leads to go ahead and qualify to go back up to your AE. Your AE now is going to be your hiring manager.
Yeah.
That is that is exactly what you have to do. And so one of the elements of that, when we're looking at that kind of concept is recruiters is sales. I am translating that across the board. Recruiters are AEs. Like they have to be able to sell. They have to be able to pitch. They have to be able to make sure that they are qualified to run in your company and for the role that they're specifically hiring for. I'll end that discussion. People can fight me on it all day long, but no, you're selling. Everybody is selling some type of vision, some way, some form. But recruiters especially are on that track. One of the things that we wanted to make sure, because you mentioned, right, like you have to find that golden nugget in the pile of crap is, and I'm not calling everybody that applies crap. I'm sorry if you felt that way. But at the same time, though, like that's one of the things that we're building in our platform, right, is as soon as that job recruiter posts that rec as an open requisition, right, our now tool will go ahead and sift through LinkedIn based on their job description and the company values. We'll match that with candidates, basically like using LinkedIn Navigator or Recruiter, and basically give you a lead list already of top talent. So you have those gold nuggets already sifted through the top, on top of the pan for you to start interacting, engaging with, and really moving that needle and sending out those outreach emails. while you still get a lot of the other stuff and other applicants that, hey, maybe Hire didn't find that candidate because we didn't
Mhm.
see that they were a public profile, or we didn't see that they were on LinkedIn, or we didn't see that they had that engagement level of like readiness to move on or something like that. Those are the type of elements that we want to make sure that we help surface and have available for our recruiters to say, hey, these are our hot leads right now. They have intent to move. They have intent to be the right qualified prospect for us. We have to move them in through the pipeline. And you have
Mhm.
to do your outreach. You have to make sure you're doing that. So when I've done some recruiter trainings, right? I don't give them recruiter specific training. I give them sales training.
Mm.
And it's the same story. It's the same story. You're qualifying, right? You're doing outreach. You're progressing the deal forward. You have a close date. You have KPIs. You're really selling a vision. You're selling a company. You're selling the hiring manager. You've got a lot on your plate with one specific role. You're still selling. I don't know why anybody thinks anything different of it. They
Mhm.
are based and measured now on filling those seats. But what oftentimes recruiters are doing, right? And this is where it comes back into sales, they're filling the seat and not the role. Yeah, I can buy a one time transactional customer, but
Yeah.
they're not going to renew with me,
You
right?
know what? This is
That's
interesting.
filling the seat. Whereas, hey, I'm going to go ahead and find the customer that's going to be a huge fit for us, product market fit, amazing. Have them come in, they sign up that role, and guess what? That employee just celebrated 5 years.
Mhm.
That is what the recruiter should also be, in my opinion. Recruiters should also be rewarded on longevity, whether or not they hit that goal or target.
It reminds me of like getting the MQLs and
It
SQLs.
is.
Like,
It is totally like when I build out Perfect Hire, right? Every ATS that I've used has sucked in a sense because it's so old, first of all, and it's clunky, and there's multiple different steps. But when I use Salesforce or I use HubSpot and I look at those and I'm like, God, why do we not use this
just
same
use the same
format?
thing.
So yeah, I was like, you know what? We're gonna fuse the two of these together. It's super intuitive, it's super fresh. And one of the big things that I will say is like each single role that we have, right, has a different pipeline, has different progress steps. So that way you don't have to say, oh, I think they're in this step, but they're on that interview. No, they're in this interview and they have three more. Or they're in this interview and this is the last one. We make sure that that pipeline changes every single time per every role because every role does hire differently. I'm not going to hire the same as a BDR as I would hire for a CRO. Just
Hmm.
not.
Hmm.
It's just not there. I'm not going to hire the same as a software engineer as I would a director of marketing. Not the same, right?
It's definitely sales. You have different buyer personas. Right now, you have different
Exactly.
target audience.
Yeah.
And again, if our leaders are just counting success by number of interviews booked, or
Right.
even seat being filled, to your point, when you just hire for the headcount, then why are we doing differently or trying to do differently for our sales departments? So why are we not taking charge of top of a funnel when we get people who are going to interact with our clients, for example, or build our products? So it makes a lot of sense. But let me ask you this: who should be responsible for training and upskilling our recruitment teams inside our organization?
Prior to transitioning completely out of enablement, right? I have been on the main focus that enablement is not revenue. It is not sales. It is not customer success. Enablement is enabling every single role. They ask us to be cross functional when we go into our positions. And when they say cross functional, they mean basically just like listen and take what you can get.
Hmm.
Like that's the cross functional of what they're asking for. But your ultimate benefit still has to be revenue generating.
Hmm.
My point of view that I see this as recruiters, especially your go to market recruiters or your sales recruiters, they are still revenue generating. Anybody that has to affect or touch your pipeline is revenue generating.
Hmm.
They should understand how the revenue org actually operates, how they actually move, how they actually function. They should be able to jump into that area if they are desperately needed. When it comes down to all the other recruiters, I think enablement has a function in there. I think L&D could step up and do it as well too. But the thing is we have to take the time to train our recruiters to do that. We have to build fundamental trainings to be able to say, hey, listen, I know you're doing great at your job. Let's make you do better. It has to be encouraging. It has to be motivating. It has to continue to drive that. And I think oftentimes we don't have somebody that's dedicated to train or enable anybody else in their specific roles other than the go-to-market teams.
Do you believe your reps burn leads practicing on client calls? When it comes to giving them one-on-one coaching sessions, you just don't have the bandwidth, so you get rid of them altogether? Or maybe you notice that your team spends a lot of time on non-revenue tasks like taking notes, updating CRM, or drafting emails. These are the exact challenges we solve for other revenue leaders like yourself. With Sell Me the Spend AI Coach, you can offer your reps role-play sessions at scale while automating one-on-one coaching sessions based on your best practices and methodology. Also, AI will take care of all their non-revenue tasks, like note-taking, CRM updates, draft the email for them, so they can focus on constant improvement while you're focusing on one thing and one thing only: revenue growth. If you're interested in learning more about the clients we are working with or use cases that might be beneficial to you, check us out at sellmethespend.ai. Some VPs, some CROs, they have this coaching culture. They really care about learning and training and developing people, right? And some don't. So when it comes to recruiting, they obviously report to HR, and we sometimes see this, separation from HR and everybody else for whatever reason. But for people who are listening to this right now, we have a lot of CROs, VPs are listening to this, and we say, okay, our revenue maybe organization should be responsible for giving some training. Enablement should give some training. But at the end of the day, someone from executive level should set the tone. Who's that person? Who should do that? Like, is it the CEO? Is it CRO should step in? Who?
I think it comes from the CEO, right? And I think when I say that, the CEO has got to have this pulse check of, we are a coaching culture, right? I'm coaching constantly. I, as the CEO, still need to be coached. I get coached all the time from my other team members on our team, right? Hey, Schalsey, you're messing that up. Hey, Schalsey, that's not how that works. Perfect, cool. Tell me how it's done. Teach me. I think the minute that we really become complacent and think that we know everything, or the minute that we say, okay, I think I know that, but I know it probably better than what they do, we're done learning. We're done learning. And I think that CEO has to have that vision of coaching, that vision of always learning. And it's not learning about sexual harassment training. It's not learning about, hey, I'm going to buy you a Udemy pass so you can go and learn everything that you want on Udemy. That doesn't do anything. When you look at this, right, that CEO, along with either your L&D or head of HR, or specifically, I would even like it better if it was with enablement, is let's help build career learning paths for these individuals. We do sales kickoffs where it's engaging, it's fun, sweet swag, cool opportunities, but it's boatloads of information. It's how are we learning? It's workshops, it's breakout rooms, it's everything. When do we do that for the other teams? When do we send our engineering team to go say, hey, we're going to go do a hackathon where we're going to break down your entire code, we're going to ask questions, and we're going to build all of this out together? When do we do that? I don't know any companies that I've seen that have really done that. Yeah. When do we take HR teams and say, hey, listen, here's a big HR conference. I want you to learn and see how our company could do better with benefits. Can we do it cheaper? Can we provide a better culture experience? Can we make sure that your jobs are easier at the same time by also inflicting that we're saving money? Where does all of this come in, right? Finance. God forbid finance. I dread anybody that does finance, and here's the reason why. There are way too many rules and regulations. Finance and legal, bless your souls. I don't ever want to train anything that you guys do. You guys will just tell me what it is, and I will give you what you need in my book. There are so many new evolving hoops, rules, laws, functions, whatever it might be, that those individuals that are doing, how are we enabling them to be up to date on the current trends? I don't see it. I don't see that. And I think that's where a company offsite, I've seen one company do this, and it was amazing. but they had a company-wide offsite. They brought
Mhm.
everybody in. Granted, they were a little bit smaller, but I'm going to say it was about 250 to 500. Brought everybody in, right? They had an all hands for a company vision one day. And you know what they did for 2 more days? Department specific kickoffs.
This is
They
cool.
made sure that there were breakout rooms for every single department to go ahead and upskill and up level those individuals. Leaders brought in decks so that way they could go ahead and train it. They made sure that there were breakout rooms so that way people could do this. There were hackathons that were happening so that way people could go ahead and decipher different codes that they needed to have. You had recruiters and HR learning about that function even more from other outside perspectives.
This is
And
super cool. I never seen this. Who owned this? Like, I'm trying to. Is it Enablement? Like, who
So
was responsible?
Enablement and L&D really partnered heavy on this project together. And it was amazing because when I was consulting with them, they were asking me about this idea. And they're like, sorry, this probably seems like a stupid idea. I go, no, this is the most genius idea I have ever
Mhm.
seen a company do. I will bend over backwards to make sure that this goes off without a hitch. I will make sure that we continue to drive excellence and learning and development for every single individual in this company, not just our go-to-market, right? When you think about enablement, right, you're not just enabling revenue, you're enabling every individual. And it was one of the most powerful things I've seen. And now I'm looking at them, like I still talk to them occasionally here and there. And one of the things that I still constantly see with them, they have only lost 3 employees since that entire event 2 years ago.
That's crazy.
3.
That's crazy. It builds culture, for sure.
It
You,
built
you,
culture. Yeah.
Matt, you gave me a great idea. Like a lot of enablers are actually watching this. Enablement is getting chopped in half, like especially since
Of course.
2023. We see what's happening. So we really have this sharp focus on, okay, we know enablers are order takers. We need to focus on tying any enablement activity to revenue. Am I against it? No. Look, I'm a seller. I
Yeah.
like revenue. I like to have some predictions around numbers and what we do that moves the needle for endgame. But at the same time, like right now, what I'm hearing, you can have other ways to get involved and get out of that order taking scenario. Is saying, look, I can take charge, partnering up with L&D. Like this is a great idea. Yes, not everybody can maybe pull it off, but does it worth a shot? Maybe, maybe just even like getting your hands dirty with one recruiter just to build a case, and then from there just straight send it to CEO. I know it requires guts, but just imagine if you really have a positive impact on one person, like a recruiter that does better than the rest. You're a strategic already, no?
I'll tell you right now, start with your go-to-market recruiter, your sales recruiter. Start there. Guarantee you, once you see that driving high revenue, high input of great top tier talent, you'll see dramatic results going into your recruitment pipeline across the company.
I love it. All right, look, I want to ask the last question. A lot of enablers have asked me, I want to start my own thing.
Yeah.
I'm not an enablement person, right? But how the hell did you do it? Like, it seems like things are working and market is not stable, and that's the truth. Like, I want to take charge, but maybe it's too late for me. I don't know if I have the skills. This is a classic. Everyone say, you're a seller. You go out there and sell your vision. I was like, no,
Right.
you're a seller too. You're in enablement. You have some skills that I don't have. I want to talk about those skills. I think you brought it up, somehow during this conversation. What are some of those skills that enablement folks can really bank on to just
Yeah.
give it a shot, maybe even as a side project to see, how we can get
Yeah.
something off the
So
ground.
I have to address this question because you said it in here, right? Like, oh, is it too late? The lifelong question that will always get in your way is it too late? When's the right time to have kids? Never. It's never the right time to have kids. When's the right time to start your own business? Never. It's never the right time. There's always a million reasons for you never to do something, but there's only one reason that it will ever get going, and that is because you want to do it. So start there. You have to have the drive. Back when I was in sales, the one thing that I absolutely hated about sales was the emotional roller coaster of sales, right? You have your high months where you're like, fuck yeah, I'm closing quota. Then you have the low months of shit, I'm barely at 60%.
Yeah.
You have that emotional volatility when you're in sales. When you get to starting your own thing, right? As a CEO, I was not mentally prepared back to get to that emotional volatility. I can't tell you how many times that I thought I was going to be awarded a grant, how many times I was going to be accepted into an accelerator, how many funding calls that I've had where like, hey, your product sucks, or hey, it's oversaturated, or I like that, but let me know when there's traction. All of this stuff, right? There were many lows. In fact, I'm probably still in a low right now. But I will tell you, there's that spark of holy shitness that really gets you going. And, for me, it cost me about $2,500 to get that spark and a trip down to Nashville. And I spent a weekend there with one of the craziest, most assertive and blunt business people that I've ever had the pleasure of meeting. And it was revolutionary. It was one of those things that's like, you know what? I was just down and defeated. We didn't get the funding that we wanted to have right before we went into this conference. I didn't feel like I was completely deflated. And it's finding that spark, finding that why, finding why you're doing this, how you're going to do it, still can remain unknown. And guess what? The how can constantly change. So you have to be agile. You have to be ready to pivot on a dime's notice. And I think when we're in enablement, right, you're oftentimes facing those same things. We build out the entire process and then it's like, oh shit, that really sucks. I don't like that. That's not what I want. Do this. Perfect. Okay, I'm going to do this for you. Hey, that still sucks. I want you to do this. Damn it, I really thought that was really cool. Hey, no, I want something simpler. Fine, I'll give you something boring and bland, right? We face that as enablers constantly. And so when you're starting your own vision, right, it's the same thing. It's where do I go? How do I do this? What do I need to do? How do I take and get my product into people's possession, or at least in front of a demo for them, and get their feedback? It's the same thing as you would when you're interviewing, right? You know you're going to have bad interviews. You know you're going to have good interviews. Get the positives. And one of the things that I've done that I really think has changed my outlook on how I actually drive my own company is I actually have a notebook right here, and I have a positives page. That's all it's called, is positives page. And anytime I get this, holy shit, yes, thank you, this is so great, I feel super high. And even if that positive turns into a complete low or a misguidedness, I look back at the feeling that I had then to continue the drive and the spark. And it's the same thing as a seller. It's the same thing as an enabler. As you're going through this, you understand, yes, I remember that month that I closed 140% of my quota. Cool. Do it again. How did you do it? Well, I have a shitty pipeline. No, you built your pipeline when you did 140% of your quota. Oh, I had a really bad onboarding class. Yeah, but look at the onboarding class you had right before that. All of them, their time to productivity is increased or decreased 20% of what you normally have. Celebrate those highs. Celebrate those highs. And I think the one thing that enablers do not do well at is celebrating their own success. You have got to document your wins.
I love it. Something new. Look, Matt, really do appreciate you. It was a great conversation. I hope, guys, you learned something new here. And if there's anything else you want to mention, it's time.
Yeah. Hey, if you want to improve your hiring process and modernize the way you're doing it, I'm going to make my plug, man. Go to theperfecthire.co and sign up for a demo. I'm happy to chat, or you can go to my LinkedIn and connect with me as well. And happy to sit through and go through your guys' hiring process with your recruiters as well. So
awesome. All right, man. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Guys, thanks, Michael.
See you next time. Cheers. Bye.